Good morning, YouTube. While I had this tore apart, I thought maybe this video might be interesting for some people who want to know how a power head or engine on a string trimmer connects to the string trimmer attachment or what's on the other end. Sometimes it might be a tiller, sometimes it might be a buzz saw, a small 5-inch blade, or in this particular case, a trimmer head. The model in question we have here is a snapper model 214 DCST, and this uses a 32:1 ratio 21.2 cubic centimeter 2-cycle engine. This unit's being sold. It's in for service. Need a little bit of carburetor work, and the last thing it needs before it heads out the door is this shaft greased. Now, a lot of people like myself, I didn't even realize these shafts, the flexible shaft that's inside this trimmer that drives the trimmer head, needed swapped end for end and greased periodically. This particular unit in its service manual says that it needs greased every 30 hours of operation and flipped end for end. And basically what that does is keep the end on the trimmer spool from wearing faster than the one that's on the power head here in the back. Whether that's the case or not, the service manual says it needs done, so you should do that. Now, this particular power head was used on 4 other different models that Snapper made. We have a 212 CST, a 212 CST, our particular model, and a 215 SST. Here's our trimmer head, the spool. I have the attachment that the line goes in out right now. It needs refilled and put back on. But if we look at where the shaft lines back up, there's a keyway right here for that flex shaft that's inside of the black shaft over here on the trimmer, and it's got that particular keyway on the power head end too. Now, I don't believe that this one had ever been greased, and if it had, it's been a long time ago. The grease is pretty much gone. If there's any in there, it must be at the other end or just gone altogether, stuck behind the bushing in the end, because the shaft right now is still a little greasy, but it's very sticky, like it's had a lot of hours of use and nobody's ever lubricated it. Most of these curved shaft trimmers like this use a flexible drive shaft inside of there. I have a Echo 200BE that's a straight shaft trimmer that uses a steel drive line. It's got the square keyways on either end, and that one you grease those as well, because it's got a set of bearings or bushings inside of that black shaft that needs greasing periodically, and that one hadn't been done in a long time. And right where that bushing and the shaft come together was blued, so it had gotten hot. And another sign to show that it might be time to grease that inner cable, like this one, it was whipping around right there where that curve's at. You could hear that smacking inside of there. It was so dry, it's just flopping around. So let me pause the camera, I'll pull that out and show you what that drive line looks at, and we'll get busy greasing it. And here's what we have inside of there. It's just a spring steel cable with a square end on either end, and as you can see, that should leave a lot of grease on my fingers, and there's hardly anything there on that particular one. I'm trying to do this one-handed. Anybody who shoots videos for YouTube knows how frustrating that can be, because every time you set something up to do a video, it never fails that something doesn't want to cooperate, so bear with me here. Next step, we're going to pull that out for length, and we're going to grease it, and we'll put it back in there. I spread a sheet out on the garage floor here to show you what that shaft, inner drive shaft, looks like. This thing is dry as a bone. It hasn't been greased in many a moon. Now, there's a bit of a dispute about what to use on these drive shafts for lubrication. Some manuals will call for a white lithium or a bearing grease of sorts. But talking to some small engine repair guys over at a local shop, they actually recommend, to be honest with you, any kind of cheap black grease will work for this. You don't need anything real high end, just as long as you coat that evenly, make sure it's good and greased when you put it back up in there. Now, I've already flipped this end for end, and we'll grease it as we're putting it back in, so that way you don't get grease all over the place, but it's still a very messy operation. So I highly suggest, unless you want to get grease all over you and some of the stuff around you while you're doing this. You might want to wear gloves or lay down a sheet of plastic or a towel or whatnot, just for safety's sake, because this is kind of a messy operation. Loaded into my gun, I do have just the standard black grease. And we'll set the camera down, or try to get it down maybe low. I'll have to try that. And see if I can take a little bit of video of this while we're putting it back together. Okay, let's get this operation under wraps. Like I said, this is a very messy operation, so gloves might want to be worn. What I like to do first off is just wipe the old cable, get as much as that nasty old schmutz off of there. As you can see, it's kind of like a cakey looking crap. It hasn't been greased in several years. It's just real sticky and powdery. So what we'll do, take a little bit of this black grease, and just put that on that cable. And you can put it back up in there as you go if you want. I'm just using an old piece of jean material here. I'll squeeze out a few drops of this grease onto. Now you don't have to go crazy with this. If you get too much on, there's a good chance it could wind up down in your trimmer head. That won't do nothing but make a mess. I have a FlexShaft attachment for my Dremel tool that also recommends a greasing like this about every 20 hours of operation. And that little tool gets really hot if you don't grease it. So take that grease on your finger and kind of spin it as you're pushing that drive shaft back in there. It gets it in all them little grooves. Don't be afraid to lay the grease to it, like I said, but you just don't want a whole ton of it on there. By the way, the music in the background, if anybody can hear it, cares, is brought to you by our True Oldies channel I found about 3-4 months ago. It's on AM. It doesn't come in the best here at home. It's only about a maybe 5,000 watt station over in Pickle, Ohio, about 20 miles away. And they also got an FM sideband, a carrier, now out of Sydney, Ohio, which is about 50 miles away. I can get that one in the truck pretty good on the radio, but here at home I can't get it at all. Really good format. They actually have several stations around the United States that they broadcast on, and it's basically just a satellite radio. They go by the TOC or True Oldies channel. A lot of good music if you like 50s and 60s music. And this particular weekend, which is April 27th to 13, they are doing an all 70s request weekend. Right up my alley. And all this music's pretty good, in my opinion anyway. Just about done here. Some people might say maybe I did this wrong or put a little too much grease on there. I also like to put just a little bit on this end before we put our trimmer head back on. And then we'll just take it, push it back up in there. Wipe the nastiness off my hands here. Nobody likes playing in grease. Never fails. You look at it wrong sometimes. You got it everywhere. Places you never even touched. I think we did alright this time. This was a pretty easy job. I had a what the heck was it? It was a hole in it for service a year or two ago. I don't know what kind of grease they used in that. It must have been like a lithium grease of some kind. It was real thin in body and it flowed real thin when it got hot. And that was some of the nastiest stuff I'd ever seen. It was just awful to work with. Okay, well, we'll get the camera back up here now. I've degreased myself. Hope everybody was able to see that okay. We just pushed that shaft back up in there and it locked back into the keyway on the other end. If you have any trouble getting that locked back into that keyway on the other end, have somebody help you, or maybe you could do it yourself. Push up on the end of that drive shaft and pull the recoil start, and you'll feel that pop back and go back in. Now our next step we want to do, take this down here on the floor if I don't fall down. Get your fingers all nasty again. Let's take a little bit of this black grease and put just a little bit down there into that. It's not going to hurt nothing, just a little extra protection down in there. And what I also like to do, I've gotten to use this PB Blaster product. So it's pretty good. It's by Liquid Wrench, or as we call it here local, Liquid Stench. Down here where this bushing passes through the body, just spray a little bit of that Liquid Wrench down in there. It'll give that bearing or bushing just a little bit of added protection down in there as it spins. And we should be good to go. Now there again, when you go to match up your keyway with the end of your drive shaft, just turn your trimmer spool until you feel that keyway match up and it'll pop up right on there. Then on this particular model, all you got to do is tighten back up this set screw right here around the shaft, and then there's another screw that goes in and locks this straight with the shaft so it's not cockeyed. That's all there is to it. Pretty easy job, a little messy, but it could be worse. Just kind of think it through before you do it. You shouldn't have too much trouble. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video. It got a little longer than what I wanted it to. And please leave a comment below if you'd like. Thanks for watching, guys. There'll be more to come later. And I forgot to mention, which this is kind of an important thing, after you've reassembled your trimmer and greased your drive line in there, what I'll typically do with them is start them up like you typically would if you're going to take it out and trim in your yard, and find a way to bring the throttle up slowly. Be it just sit there with it and pull your throttle trigger back, or find something to wedge in there to open that throttle up just a little bit so that head will start spinning. That way you can slowly start to work that grease in that drive line. Let that do that for maybe a minute or two, and you can slowly increase the speed. It's definitely recommended to take it out after you've quote-unquote broke in the grease. Run it at full speed for maybe a minute or two, see if that chattering went away, and if it has, and you've done a thorough grease job, you should be good to go. If you still have some chattering, you might want to pull that shaft out, that drive shaft, flex shaft out again. Check your grease job. It might have worked in some spots that didn't have grease, so a little bit more might need to be applied. But if you were liberal enough with it when you did the greasing of the drive shaft to begin with, you should be A-OK. Just wanted to throw that in there. Sorry for making this a lengthy video, but there'll be more to come later. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.